Science and Technology Committee on the critical importance of science and technology in the 21st century and global economy. And I want to especially welcome our very distinguished panelists today. I saw that you all had a chance to meet Mr. Hall. I hope you checked your billfold to make sure that as he passed through you, things are still all right. Let me also say that we are being televised today, and I know there are folks that will be watching us from the office. The Democrats have an important caucus going on right now, so some of our folks are trying to break loose. I know that Vern Ellers and others are in a variety of meetings, so folks will be coming in, but we're well represented by all their staffs today also. In 2005, I joined Senators Bingaman and Alexander and Congressman Sherry Bowler in asking the National Academies of Science to study the urgent challenges facing the U.S. in maintaining global leadership in science and technology. In response, the academies formed an all-star committee and issued their report entitled Rising Above the Gathering Storm, Energizing and Employing America for a Brighter Future Economy. For a long time, have had on my desk the preliminary copy. I'm pleased today, maybe your experience here helped the printer get going, but we now have the final version that's out. It's a very inspiring term, the title of the report, but it's also a very inspiring report, and we thank you for that. That committee was chaired by Mr. Augustine and included Mr. Barrett, both of whom are here and witnesses today. It has become an enormously influential report, not only owing to the grave dangers it predicts if we are complacent, but also owing to 20 constructive action items it spells out that will lead to a continued American leadership and prosperity. I'm an enthusiastic advocate of the report, and after studying its recommendation, I drafted legislation in the 109th Congress to implement each and every action item that fell within the Science Committee's jurisdiction. Sadly, little of the competitiveness agenda made it into law, but in the 110th Congress, that will change. There is a bipartisan consensus that investing in education and research along the lines of Gathering Storm report is necessary. That's why I'm reintroducing H.R. 362 and H.R. 363 in the first days of this Congress. And I'm pleased that Speaker Pelosi has made these two bills a major part of her competitiveness agenda. H.R. 362 is 10,000 teachers, 10,000 minds, or 10 million minds Science and Math Scholarship Act. This bill addresses the critical shortage of certified science and math teachers in the U.S. It will produce a new core of outstanding science and math teachers who are dedicated to and well prepared for teaching. And this is not an experiment. We know that the model works, and President Dynes is on our panel today, can discuss about the success of Caltech program, which used the same technique. H.R. 362 also addresses the needs of the current science and math teachers through summer institutes and master's degree programs focused on content knowledge that are targeted just for them. And we're not talking about the old-fashioned professional development programs. We're talking about sustained programs focusing on disciplinary knowledge of teachers that will create a network of 50,000 teachers, leaders, and across this country. H.R. 362 places these education programs at the National Science Foundation, and Dr. Lane on our panel today can explain why the National Science Foundation is the right agency for this job. Leaders of the business community, such as Mr. McGraw, Ms. Wince-Smith, and Mr. Barrett, are on the panel today, will explain to us why the full breadth of the corporate sector takes an interest in pre-college math and science education. In order to produce the most innovative scientists and engineers in the world, our children must be the highest achieving science and math students in the world. But the pathway that leads to innovation in the global economy doesn't end at the 12th grade or with a college education. We also need to support research and development enterprise in science and technology to maintain our world leadership in these areas. That brings me to the second, H.R. 363, which this committee reported unanimously and should be before the full House next month. H.R. 363 is sowing the seeds through Science and Engineering Research Act. Mr. Augustine, you might remember that term. I completely plagiarized your work, which I hope that you will find as a compliment. It was done so that it wouldn't be a Democrat or Republican bill, but rather a recommendation of this very well-knowledged group. This bill will strengthen long-term basic research in physical sciences, mathematics sciences, and engineering. It directs funding toward graduate students and early career researchers in these areas. It also establishes a presidential innovation award to stimulate scientific and engineering advances in the national interest. Investing in science education and research along these lines is necessary if the U.S. is to maintain its position as a global leader in technology and innovation. Now, don't claim these bills do everything. There are a variety of good ideas out there that address issues of national competitiveness, and this committee is going to be the committee of good ideas. So even though these bills don't address every recommendation of the Gathering Storm Report, they do address what seems to me to be the highest priority concerning that and that have bipartisan support. And you can be assured we'll be building that bipartisan support for additional measures very soon. Today, we've asked our distinguished panelists to address the reasons why the promotion of science and technology is so critical to America's prosperity, where we stand today and where we need to be in the future. And I look forward to hearing their expert testimony. At this time, I recognize our distinguished ranking member, Mr. Hall, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I understand that you had a well-attended press conference, and I'm sorry I missed it. I always enjoy hearing what our leader says, and Mr. Augustine, and Norm, nice to have you here again. You've been here many times, and I've quoted your statement that we can't be 911 to the whole world a lot of times. I always got good response on it, and I say to Dr. Neal Lane that I might be your president if I'd answered the letter correctly. I received it. I was in the top 10 in consideration to be president of Rice University, and I simply sent them back a copy of my transcript and a press release that said that I'd made 4 F's and a D one time, and my dad punished me for spending too much time on one subject. So I've got both those letters in my office up there. I've not heard back from them. So, but I always on the positive side, all of you who were there will be spared listening to my being repetitive. My message for this hearing is the same. If America is going to remain on top of the evolving world economy, we have to be dedicated to improving our workforce. We don't have time to stop for a breather because countries like China and India are breathing down our necks, pumping out doctors and pumping out engineers to great differences in numbers, and probably not quality, but in numbers alone. Today's workers increasingly require a solid academic foundation in science and math as well as technical know-how in order to succeed in today's high-tech workplace. Despite these growing demands nationally, only 1 out of every 50 high school graduates will ever obtain an engineering or technical degree. Further, most American high school graduates are either not sufficiently prepared or not sufficiently motivated to pursue advanced study in science, math, engineering, or technology fields, and this is a real problem. While there are no quick fixes, we can take steps now to re-examine and improve how teachers teach and how students learn math and science, and I'm pleased to see the Science Committee doing just that. Mr. Chairman, I salute you for that, and I thank you for that. As a part of the H.R. 362, which I believe is on the agenda for today, I'm particularly pleased to see that we're using the University of Texas You teach, not UT, that'd be University of Texas, as some say University of Tennessee. But You Teach is a program that they use as a basis for scholarship programs for the STEM students who commit to teaching K-12 science and math classes after graduation. This program's been replicated and expanded at the University of California, and I look forward to hearing more about it from Dr. Dynes. Along with improving education, Congress should also work to promote competitiveness by increasing federal R&D funding while simultaneously stimulating private sector R&D. The administration's American Competitiveness Initiative is working to do just that on the federal level, but there's still some room for creativity on how to increase private sector basic research. The government's role for the latter should be to create a system of incentives. As the President said, and I quote, The role of government is not to create wealth. The role of our government is to create an environment in which the entrepreneur can flourish, in which minds can expand, in which technologies can reach new frontiers, unquote. Encouraging private sector innovation through tax credits and other such programs will improve the American economy, make us more competitive globally, and also bring new products to the American people. I've seen firsthand America's innovative capabilities, and I know we can do better. America's preeminence in the global economy depends on what all of us do today. Each of us, all levels of government, industry, academia, parents, and students, has an important role to play in keeping America competitive and ahead of the innovative curve. I look forward to working closely with you, Mr. Chairman, on these competitiveness issues and to hearing what our esteemed witnesses have to say on the subject. And with that, I yield back my time, and I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I ask unanimous consent that all additional opening statements submitted by the committee members be included in the record. Without objection, so ordered. Now I'm pleased today to welcome this illustrious panel of academic, business, and government leaders to testify before the committee. First, Mr. Norm Augustine. As Mr. Hall has said, he's been before our committee many times, and we're the better off for it. He's the retired chairman and CEO of Lockheed Martin. He's also a member of the advisory board to the Department of Homeland Security and served for 16 years on the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. In the 1970s, he served as Undersecretary and then Acting Secretary of the Army. And Mr. Augustine chaired the National Academy's committee that wrote The Gathering Storm. Mr. Augustine.
Well, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you about a topic that I deem to be one of the most important facing America today. Mr. Chairman, with the committee's permission, I'd like to submit a formal statement for the record and briefly summarize it here. Thank you. As you point out, it was my privilege to chair the National Academy's committee that wrote the Gathering Storm report, and you were kind enough, polite enough not to mention that it was really behind your efforts and those of your colleagues that the academies began this effort in the first place. It was an effort that, of course, joined that of many other organizations, including the Council for Competitiveness and others. Our commission, or our committee, included 20 members, bipartisan or nonpartisan, really, quite broad. Included a number of CEOs of major corporations, presidents of a number of universities, 3 Nobel laureates. It included former state superintendent of schools, a number of former presidential appointees. Our findings were essentially unanimous, and I will briefly summarize them in a moment. I might say that the underlying principle behind our work was what has been called the death of distance, which refers to the notion that many transactions that in the past required people to be in close proximity to one another no longer require that. And that means that, for example, when you have a CAT scan read, it may be read by a physician in Australia. When you write software, it may be written by an engineer in Bangalore. You have your income tax done, it may well be done by an accountant in Costa Rica. Tom Friedman has said in his marvelous book about the Earth being flat that globalization has accidentally made Bangalore, Beijing, and Bethesda next-door neighbors. And when it comes to seeking jobs, that is certainly true. The situation was exacerbated at the end of the Cold War when over 3 billion new would-be capitalists entered the world job market. And it is a world job market. And those 3 billion people are highly motivated, increasingly well-educated, and willing to work for a fraction of what American workers at all levels are willing to work for, or at least have been accustomed to working for. And that suggests that we have a major competitiveness disadvantage that we have to somehow find a way to offset. And it's been the view of virtually every study that I'm familiar with, certainly the National Academy study, that that offset will have to come from being the world's best innovators and first to market. There are a number of indicators that things are not going particularly well in this regard. Although our overall economy looks good in many respects, Americans with 5% of the world's population produce 28% of the goods and services that the world produces. We've created 2 million new jobs each year in recent years. Household net worth just passed $50 trillion. But there are a lot of worrisome signs, the gathering storm, if you will. For example, new R&D facilities that are to be built in the world in the next few years, 77% are scheduled to be in India or China. You're all familiar with the fact that the world-renowned Bell Labs, once really the finest corporate research facility in the world, I think unarguably, was recently sold to the French, what was left of it. The R&D investment in the physical sciences has been stagnant for 20 years now in this country in real dollars. Of course, it's a good thing that others prosper, but the National Academy's goal is to ensure that America continues to prosper in this world. The Academy's findings were straightforward. The first was that our standard of living and indeed our security in the years ahead will depend on people having quality jobs in America. And secondly, that to have a quality job, we're going to have to be exceptional in the areas of science and technology, because those are the areas that underpin to a very large degree innovation, which, as I said, is likely to be our primary competitive advantage. The recommendations we've made that have to do with science and technology, the first is that the federal investment in basic research be doubled in real dollars over the next 7 years. Secondly, that a series of special grants be set up for early researchers, recognizing the fact that so many of the great technical breakthroughs and scientific breakthroughs have been by young people. And yet, because of the constraints on funding and the conservatism of granting that funding, we now find a situation where first grants on average go to a person 42 years old. Thirdly, we recommended that $500 million a year be devoted to modernizing the instrumentation and equipment infrastructure of our scientific research labs in this country. Next was that 8% of the R&D budget be set aside for discretionary application by the heads of local laboratories, the people who know best where the promise of future innovation lies, and with a particular focus on high-risk, high-payoff research. We have proposed creating an ARPA equivalent in the Department of Energy. ARPA was so successful in most people's eyes in terms of helping the Department of Defense. Our hope is that we could do the same thing in the Department of Energy. And finally, we suggested, and you referred to it, Mr. Chairman, in your remarks, a national award for innovation. I would say that the reaction of the media and the public to our recommendations has been astonishingly favorable. I have a collection of op-eds, several from every state in the Union, almost all supporting our findings. Because of its length, I won't submit it for the record, but if any of the members would like a copy, I'd be happy to see to it you get it. And with that, Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for this opportunity to address your committee.
Thank you, Mr. Augustine, for your testimony. More importantly, your long-time commitment to our country. Next, Mr. Harold Terry McGraw, the third, is Chairman, President, and CEO of McGraw-Hill Companies. I guess when your name's on the front door, you can do whatever you want. He does it well, and is also the Chairman of the Business Roundtable, as well as the President of the Committee Encouraging Corporate Philanthropy. Thank you, Mr. McGraw, for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Hall, and members of the committee, and thank you for your leadership and the ideas that are embodied in 362 and 363. The CEOs of the Business Roundtable are very much in support of your work. In 2005, the Business Roundtable and 14 other national business associations created the Tapping America's Potential campaign with the goal of doubling the number of American science, technology, engineering, and mathematics graduates by 2015. We believe that expanding the talent pool is the critical element of the innovation agenda, that America must pursue in order to remain competitive, and it is all about competitiveness. America has a tremendous record of success and growth, any way that you look at it, in economic terms, in technological terms, medical terms, any way. The United States is a $13.2 trillion economy, which is bigger than any other country by a wide margin. But to keep moving ahead in our changing and increasingly very competitive world, everyone, young and old, needs a roadmap to find their way. Business and government together need to help every American locate avenues to continually upgrade their skills and knowledge so that they can succeed. Education and lifelong learning are essential for a better life and a brighter future for America. Census data tells us that people with bachelor's degrees can earn more than twice those with only a high school diploma, and 3 times more than a high school dropout. Alliance for Excellence Education research shows that if the dropouts from the class of 2006 earned diplomas instead of dropping out, our economy would see an additional $309 billion in wages over those students' lifetime. The economic impact of increasing our graduation rate is staggering to the individual and the economy as a whole. Johns Hopkins University research shows that half of our dropouts in this country come from 2,000 of our 14,000 high schools. We can get at half that problem if we just focus on those 2,000. Your committee has been working on 2 important bills that would provide critical support for the foundation of Americans' innovation system. We endorse those bills, and let me tell you why. Our economy stands at a critical juncture. The United States is still, again, the world's economic leader, but that lead could slip. Powerful economic rivals have emerged, and these competitors are investing in innovation. Meanwhile, our federal support for research has declined relative to the size of our economy. In business, research is an investment pegged to sales or revenues, but federal funding for R&D has declined from 1.25% of GDP to 0.75% today. Imagine if a high-tech company invested in an R&D at such a rate. Shouldn't we be investing in our children's future at a high-tech rate, or at least a greater rate than we do now? And if so, what should that rate be? Also, demands of the workplace are increasing. The number of jobs requiring technical training is growing at 5 times the rate of non-technical jobs. But the U.S. education system is not keeping pace. More than half of the U.S. students entering college drop out before earning a degree. And the most recent data from the National Assessment of Educational Progress Exams, NAEP, reveals that high school seniors' reading performance over the past decade actually declined. And according to NAEP, less than 1/4 of seniors perform at their grade level or above in math. The American people understand that the competitive landscape is changing. Today's challenge is about maintaining the higher standard of living Americans have come to expect. That means creating more high-wage jobs in high-value-added industries here in America. And it means preparing all of our citizens to compete and to succeed in the global economy. The key to our competitiveness challenge is innovation. Innovation drives productivity growth, creates new products, even whole new industries, and generates high-wage employment and a higher standard of living for all Americans. Productivity gains have created a new economic paradigm, enabling the Fed to maintain a generally accommodative interest rate policy in the face of strong economic growth without triggering inflation. It's time to implement the recommendations of the Gathering Storm Report and Tapping America's Potential report. We appreciate the work this committee is doing to press forward. And finally, innovation is all about talent. In a world where natural resources, capital, and unskilled labor are all globally available, it is the well-educated, skilled, and creative individual who will make the difference in economic performance. That is why the business community's innovation recommendations focus on education. Today, American business and higher education leaders released the American Innovation Proclamation, urging Congress to double basic research at key federal science agencies, increase the funding of proven programs and incentives for math and science teacher recruitment and professional development, welcome highly educated foreign professionals, particularly those holding advanced science and technology degrees, especially from U.S. universities, by reforming our visa policies and, of course, our H-1B visa programs, and make permanent a strengthened R&D tax credit to encourage continued private sector innovation investment. And I'm proud to be a signatory on this proclamation, along with so many business leaders who believe so much in what you're doing. And in conclusion, it's worth noting that the forces driving economic integration and global competition were all invented here. America is in the best position to take advantage of the changing landscape and to continue to lead the world in these areas so long as we recognize the challenges we face, we maintain the right focus on education, and invest where necessary to ensure that Americans succeed in the new environment. Mr. Chairman, it is up to us to ensure that the 21st century is the next American century, and with your help and the members of this committee, we will do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGraw. And now we have Dr. Robert Dynes, as president of the University of California. Dr. Dynes is also professor of physics and material science at the university. And before coming to the University of California, he had 22 years career at the AT&T Bell Laboratories, and in 1989 was elected to the National Academies of Science. Thank you, Dr. Dynes.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Hall, and other members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on this important issue of science and technology leadership in the 21st century. I want to first specifically recognize Chairman Gordon and Norm Augustine for their leadership at bringing us to this point. It's an honor to be with these distinguished folks on the panel. My written testimony, which I've submitted for the record, outlines the University of California's vision for ensuring strong competitiveness in California and the U.S. My job is to keep California competitive. My vision rests on three planks. One, fueling innovation and boosting the nation's economy by leading in RD&D, research, development, and a second D, delivery of the products of the university to society and delivery of educated, motivated innovators to our society. Two, forging strategic alliances with the best and brightest minds around the world to solve global problems that confront all societies for our benefit. Three, enhancing the quality of California's future workforce by tackling the crisis on K-12 education. This afternoon I will provide a snapshot of a program at the University of California that speaks to the third plank. This exciting program we call the Science and Math Initiative, or 1,000 Teachers, 1,000,000 Minds, is one of the models for a national program, the 10,000 Teachers, 10,000,000 Minds, which was outlined in the National Academy's report and your legislation, H.R. 362. My own motivation for this priority came from my many travels throughout California, where I encountered entire schools and entire school districts where there wasn't a single credentialed science and math teacher in the school. Mr. Chairman, you have called upon us to recognize the challenges we face in research, and most especially in the education of our youth in mathematics and science. Your legislation creates an excellent model for research universities, and I say research universities, to implement that vision. And we at the University of California are stepping up to that plate to create a pipeline of math and science innovators for the nation's future and teachers for the nation's future. The Science and Math Initiative is one of my highest priorities as president of the University of California. It has personal significance for me because as a first-generation college student, my life was transformed by a math and science education way back in the Sputnik era. The components are described in more detail in my written testimony, but essentially we must pay attention to three aspects to develop good teachers that will sustain. One, recruit UC students who are majoring or considering majoring in science and math to be teachers. Two, provide these students with innovative curricula that rely on the expertise of our faculty in science, math, and education. Three, offer incentives to attract and retain these students as teachers, including a streamlined path to certification and financial incentives, such as loan forgiveness and paid summer internships, even after they are in the teaching workforce, to sustain them, a lifeline from the university to the teachers. The University of California deans who direct the campus Science and Math Initiative along with the faculty of science and mathematics departments and in our schools of departments of education, are energized, are committed, and are actually working together. This may sound like a no-brainer to you, but it's quite novel to have the science faculty working with the School of Education on teacher training. It's really quite novel, and it's working. Attached to my written testimony is an example from UC Berkeley of the new curriculum they are developing, which blends cutting-edge content knowledge in the sciences, including lab and field experiences, with distinctive new pedagogy specifically suited to convey this knowledge to young students. We supplement the program with a field experience course. We actually put freshmen out in teaching environments. It continues for 4 years, where students work in local schools under the supervision of mentors or master teachers, and they meet regularly in small seminars to discuss the experiences and learn from each other. Our early research on this field experience course has demonstrated that it has a profound effect on student aspirations. Many intensify their commitment to teaching, and many find that their interest deepens in various aspects of their own science and math as they work with students. Teaching science motivates a deeper understanding of science, and everybody in the university knows that. Some of them also discover that teaching is not for them, which is important to learn as early as possible. One of the strengths of the California Higher Education Master Plan is that many students transfer to UC from the CSU, the California State University, and the community colleges. And this provides a rich source for future teachers. This academic year, as many as 100 community college freshmen are involved in field experiences with our UC freshmen, and allows them to transition smoothly when they transfer to UC later. We are now in the second year of the program, developing our model simultaneously on all 9 of our general campuses. Collectively, our campuses provide an excellent laboratory for testing different approaches to meet our program goals. We are inventing this as we go along, and by the year 2010, we are committed to producing 1,000 science and math teachers per year for the state of California. While each of the campuses approaches this program separately, there are several common elements that we believe will lead to success, and those are described in my written testimony. We learn best practices from looking at all 9 campuses. At all the campuses, the students gain a deep grounding in their math and science majors, each early field experience, and an expeditious pathway to teacher certification. To date, more than 600 students are enrolled in the SMI on our campuses. Nearly 1,000 student placements have occurred in schools for field experiences, and we are involved with 467 teachers, 174 schools, and 41 districts across California. This is now the second year we're into it. It's growing rapidly. I'm also happy to report that the Science and Math Initiative has attracted enormous enthusiasm and support from both the public and the private sectors. The vigorous support of Governor Schwarzenegger and the state legislature has been instrumental in the program's strong start. And to date, corporate and foundation funding is over $4 million. I'm especially grateful to several of our corporate major sponsors, including Intel, and I personally thank Craig Barrett for pushing Intel into supporting us on this program. I want to thank you for introducing H.R. 362, and I offer the university's support for your efforts. This bill will greatly assist programs like ours, and we look forward to working with your staff on a few modifications that we believe are necessary to make this as flexible as possible. As a physicist, I look for things that are scalable. This program is scalable. It can work in school districts, it can work in the state, it can work in the nation. H.R. 362 will allow expansion of the Science and Math Initiative concept from California to the nation, and also focus more broadly on other elements essential to improving K-12 math and science education. H.R. 362 is premised on students graduating with a science or math degree and teaching credential within 4 years. However, as we've developed down this path, many of our best students take a little longer to complete a science and math degree. The Science and Math Initiative streamlines the credentialing process. But because of varying teacher licensure requirements, especially in California, additional postgraduate training is often necessary. We would like to see the legislation amended to allow flexibility in creating integrated programs that streamline the process to obtaining a bachelor's or master's degree and a teaching credential. We look forward to working with you and your staff to enact this legislation. In addition, we need the Congress and the President to invest federal resources in this endeavor. UC can and I emphasize will, increase the number of science and math teachers who are trained, qualified, skilled, and equally importantly, passionate about science and mathematics. However, we need sustained, long-term commitment from our current partners and the federal government to realize our intended effects. Finally, let me give you an example of the value of this program. And I share the words of one of our Science and Math Initiative students who was out in the classroom. After completing field work in the classroom, I knew teaching was for me. It made me realize the passion I had to help others, and at that point, I knew I wanted to make it a career. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dynes. We're going to be marking this bill, or both these bills up, the 362, in 2 weeks from today. So we would very much like to hear your recommendations during that period, so that if we can perfect this, we certainly want to.
Thank you.
Now, our next witness is Craig Barrett, is chairman of the board of Intel Corporation. He also served on the National Academies Committee that wrote the Gathering Storm Report. Before joining Intel, Dr. Barrett served on the Stanford University faculty and is currently the chairman of the National Academies of Engineering. Thank you, Dr. Barrett.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hall, other members of the committee, I'd like to first say that I'm in violent agreement with the three commentaries from my right, even though Dr. Dynes represents the University of California and I'm a Stanford graduate. Shows what cooperative spirit can do. I applaud the recognition by the Science Committee of the challenges the United States faces and the introduction of 362 and 363 to promote higher quality and quantity of math and science teachers in K through 12 and to promote increased federal support of basic research in our research universities, I think are critical to U.S. competitiveness going forward. I noticed that in 362, one aspect of that bill is in fact to strengthen the Noyce Scholarship Program, which was authorized under the NSF Authorization Act of 2002 and named after Bob Noyce, who was the founder of Intel Corporation. I had the opportunity to work closely with Bob through most of my professional career at Intel, and I think he is perhaps emblematic of what the committee is pondering and what the witnesses before you are talking about today. Bob Noyce was an exceptional man, and when he was an undergraduate at Grinnell University, his interest in technology was really sparked by a physics professor who was very engaging, but also had contacts with Bell Laboratories and was able to get a few of the first transistors that Bill Shockley and his group produced. Bringing those back to Grinnell and working with Bob Noyce, the physics professor was able to get Bob intrigued in this topic. Bob subsequently left Grinnell, went to MIT, received his doctorate, emigrated to the West, went to work at Shockley Transistor initially, but left there, founded Fairchild Semiconductor, left there and founded Intel Corporation in 1968. Parenthetically, Bob would have been a Nobel recipient aside from his unfortunate death in 1990 before Jack Kilby at TI, co-inventor of the transistor with Bob, was awarded the Nobel laureate. I think Bob's career is emblematic. An engaged student, an engaged professor, probing the edge of technology in association with a top-flight research laboratory, also probing the edge of technology. Combining those three things together really is what promotes U.S. competitiveness and innovation. It's the sort of thing we've taken for granted years and years, which is now becoming challenged as the world becomes a much smaller place and other countries are copying our leadership activities. By the way, if you want to see some wonderful examples of innovation, I might invite any of you who are interested to the Intel Science Talent Search Finals, which are here in Washington at the Reagan Building tonight. You'll see 40 of the brightest high school kids in the world. All of their research projects makes my PhD dissertation look like child's play. But there are wonderful examples of innovation still in the United States. There are wonderful research universities still in the United States, but we need to do more. Rising Above the Gathering Storm was published about 18 months ago. Since then, not much has happened, although we have increased the R&D budget in some of the basic research activities this year, and we're grateful, and we think that's a great first step. H.R. 362 and 363 have the opportunity to take that much further. We have been advocating both at Intel and the high-tech community for some time the things necessary to be competitive in today's knowledge-based world. A wonderful K-12 education system, especially in mathematics and science, a university system that prepares the talent for the next generation, federal support of basic research, which is really the seed corn for the ideas for the next generation of products, goods and services and companies, a patent system which is fair and promotes invention in the United States, a tax system which promotes investment and innovation in the United States. All of these things are necessary for us to succeed. The two bills we're talking about today are a good first start in this particular area. I would leave you with one other thought. I've heard people comment sometimes that this is just another sky is falling routine. In the 1980s, many of us complained about Japanese companies and the potential competition from Japan. If you recall, Japan emphasized quality and manufacturing and required the entire United States manufacturing industry to accommodate those two trends in order to compete effectively with Japan. We did so. Since that time, the rest of the world has recognized that it's not a manufacturing future, it's an innovation future. And they've seen what we have done well, and they are copying that. And the challenge for us is to recognize that they are copying what we did well for the last several decades. Our challenge is to do what is necessary to be successful for the next several decades. H.R. 362 and 363 are a good first step in that direction and should be applauded. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barrett. Next we have Dr. Neal Lane, a Malcolm Gillis University professor at Rice University and senior fellow at the James Baker Institute for Public Policy. Dr. Lane is a former director of the National Science Foundation and director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Dr. Lane also chaperoned a 2-week trip that former Chairman Jim Sensenbrenner and I took to the South Pole. I sometimes wonder whether that was a science experiment, just having us together for 2 weeks, but and we're glad you are. So thank you, Dr. Lane.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, the ranking member, and fellow Texan Ralph Hall, members of the committee. I also want to thank you for your support in that effort the NSF was making at that time to secure the funds to rebuild the South Pole Research Station, which I think has happily come to pass. It takes a while to build things at the South Pole. We greatly appreciate that. That was very important for science and for the nation. Thank you also for inviting me to join this very distinguished panel to address a matter of considerable urgency, as the Gathering Storm report, I think, made quite clear. That report put forward some bold and I think very reasonable specific actions, and I applaud you, Mr. Chairman, and your fellow co-sponsors for legislation 362, House Bill 362 and 363, which will move much of that bipartisan agenda along. And I say that not on behalf of the science community, but rather out of concern for my 4 grandchildren, aged 4 to 16, and their happiness and their well-being in the nation that they will inherit. Our generation, happily, has enjoyed the fruits of 6 decades of considerable public and private investment in research, much of it carried out in our universities, which produced cutting-edge science, discovery, path-breaking technologies, and a science and engineering workforce second to none, including many talented men and women who've come here from other parts of the world. Thank God we invited them to come. But in recent years, the U.S. has been reluctant to make the kind of long-term investments necessary to secure a bright future for Americans, and we seem to have other priorities. My grandchildren and their generation will inherit a different America, and they think perhaps a bit worn out or used up America. And that doesn't seem fair somehow. I was privileged to work for President Bill Clinton, who was fond of saying there's nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what's right with America. And indeed, there are things that we can do, and we can do them now, to assure our young people the future they deserve, and we should not fail them. So, Mr. Chairman, that then brings me to the specific legislation you put forward to address some of these matters. In H.R. 363, you authorized substantial increases for basic research in the physical and mathematical sciences and engineering
to the National Science Foundation, Department of Energy's Office of Science, NIST, NASA, and the Department of Defense. These agencies have supported excellent research, much of it in universities. Increasing funding for their research programs will pay big dividends in the future, as it has done in the past. NSF has the broadest mission for these agencies to promote progress in all areas of science, mathematics, and engineering. And studies in social, behavioral, and economic sciences can be just as relevant as the physical sciences to the process of innovation and American industrial competitiveness by helping us understand people and organizations. NSF should be given the flexibility to set its priorities among all its directorates and programs. In addition to these agencies, I believe your bill should also include NOAA, which in a fundamental way is also relevant to innovation and competitiveness. NOAA supports much of the research on weather and climate change, and its National Weather Service applies the latest science and observations, including data and weather satellites, to make weather forecasts. Accurate forecasts can save lives, and they can save money. Katrina cost us well over $120 billion, and immeasurable human costs. These costs are likely to be higher in the future. Funding for NOAA should be increased, and its planned cutbacks in university support should be reversed. The same is true for NASA. Furthermore, NASA, the agency with the capability to design and launch satellites, should not be allowed to define away its responsibility by dropping Earth observations from its mission statement. Now turning to your second bill, H.R. 362, I want to commend the committee and you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership in moving forward to address the serious problem of K-12 science education and math education. We'll not be able to address the workforce need without improving our schools and teaching in those schools. In your letter, Mr. Chairman, you asked me specifically to address the appropriateness of the proposed role of the National Science Foundation in administering the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education programs contained in H.R. 362. So let me give you three reasons, Mr. Chairman, why I consider NSF to be the right agency for this important task. First, NSF has decades of experience working with school districts and teachers, for example, through the much-heralded summer institutes, such as the ones you propose. Department of Energy is also in a good position to organize excellent teacher institutes. Second, NSF has funded much of the pedagogical research that has been done in this country and can, I believe, best connect the products of that research with the teachers and the classrooms. Third, NSF has a close relationship with most of the nation's researchers in the physical sciences and engineering in colleges and universities where our science and math teachers get their education and can best influence the quality of teacher education. And I should add a fourth, namely that the NSF program uses competitive peer review to select only the most meritorious proposals for funding. Mr. Chairman, this committee has long been a bipartisan voice of reason for advocacy for high standards in research and education and in the defense of integrity of science. And I thank you for that, all of you, and I congratulate you for moving forward with this important legislation. I have one last request, Mr. Chairman, something I'd like to see the committee put on its future agenda, and that is to study how the whole federal science and technology apparatus works and how government-wide research priorities are actually set in science, engineering, and education. And NIH, that has seen flat budgets for 4 years running, should be a part of that discussion. And I recognize this committee has an oversight responsibility for many agencies, including NIH. I'd like the committee to address the question, in our current system, is the whole really greater than the parts? I personally believe America can do better. Our grandkids deserve better. And given the urgent tone of the Gathering Storm report, we may not have all that much time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lane. Interesting that you mentioned that. We are in a period of scarce resources or limited resources, and I have been concerned whether it's the national labs or different agencies that are maybe trying to do the same thing. Are we really focusing our money best? And I think that does need to be an area of review. I don't want to micromanage, but we do want to get our best bang for the buck, and I think we need to find how we can get our best synergy, and we will be having that oversight hearing in the future. Then we have Dr. Deborah Wince-Smith, is president of the Council of Competitiveness. She was a former Assistant Secretary of Technology Policy in the Department of Commerce and served as the Assistant Director at the Office of Science and Technology Policy. Welcome, Ms. Wince-Smith.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Hall, and members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to appear before you today on the critical issue of U.S. competitiveness, the skills of all Americans, and ensuring that our nation continues to invest in R&D at the forefront of knowledge. Since the Council on Competitiveness issued its report, Innovate America, in December 2004, there's been a drumbeat of action on national innovation and competitiveness agenda, with the National Academies, Gathering Storm Report, the work of the Business Roundtable. We talk about innovation being multidisciplinary infusion, and I will say that all of these reports really have taken the best ideas and come together really in a very coordinated way now to push this through as a very important national priority. I might just mention that this morning I left from Secretary Paulson's summit that he has underway on competitiveness of capital markets. And Warren Buffett and Jeff Immelt and Chairman Greenspan were all talking about the importance of having U.S. leadership in capital markets, access to liquidity, everything that fuels our innovation. And what was very interesting as the discussion unfolded, that the two issues that came to the top of the agenda were the importance of our math and science education, the need for systemic immigration reform, and the importance of investing in R&D at the frontier. Mr. Chairman, I would like to really thank you and the members of this committee for keeping the pressure up on Congress to really look at competitiveness legislation as a whole. And I know that while the private sector is doing many, many important things, at the end of the day, Congress and the administration must act if we are going to continue to ensure that our children have a legacy of prosperity in the years to come. And the Council is very much in favor of H.R. 362 and H.R. 363. I have submitted a written statement for the record, and what I really wanted to do this afternoon is just very briefly focus your attention on 4 very powerful data points from the Council's recently released Competitiveness Index, where America stands. This is a quantitative and qualitative look at the state of the U.S. economy vis-a-vis our global competition and the trends in the future. The first chart that I want to show you is the importance of small, medium-sized businesses. These are our job drivers, our job creators for the future. This really shows that over the last 2 decades, 80% of the total net new jobs in this country have come from small and medium-sized firms. The entrepreneurial engine is what's going to drive our future. We know that our large global corporations are global enterprises. They're optimizing their investments, their search for talent, their R&D in global supply chains, and this adds tremendous value to the U.S. economy. But in terms of job creation, it's the entrepreneurial economy that will drive our future, and they will be the game-changing innovators, just as Bob Noyce some years ago exemplified the entrepreneur creating a global enterprise such as Intel. So clearly, STEM education and increased investment in basic research are the key drivers for entrepreneurial business development. These will be the assets on which our entrepreneurs will build the businesses of the future. Access to risk capital, seamless technology transfer, and accelerated deployment, and enhancing our collaboration between business, academia, and our national laboratories are really the essential building blocks that also have to be improved if we are going to capitalize on these investments in basic science and the people that will make all of this happen. The second chart I want to show you is how higher order skills are the skills of the future. And so the investments that we're talking about through these 2 pieces of legislation are really going to be the investments to develop the skills that are going to be important as we go forward in this 21st century economy. Routine, manual, and cognitive skills, any job that can be digitized, those jobs have declined in importance, and it's going to be complex communication, expert thinking, judgment, intuition, and idea generation capacity that will create the innovation future for America. And again, STEM education is at the heart of grounding for all the jobs in the American economy. And I will also mention that it's these types of skills and higher order thinking that are going to be instrumental in increasing the intangible assets on which our economy also depends. Our work has shown that the value of intangible assets now is about $1 trillion, equaling that of tangible investment. And again, that relates to math, science, and investment in R&D. This next chart on high-wage, fast-growth occupations clearly shows that, again, we have to have higher levels of education, and we have to have education that combines STEM education, math, science, literacy, engineering skills with language, humanities, and social sciences, so that we will have the jobs that drive creativity. The thing that's really important on this chart is to look at the big blue circles, because the big blue circles are showing high-value, high-skilled jobs with high-value income for American citizens. So these three charts really paint a very powerful picture on why the legislation before this committee is so important and why we must focus on the skills America needs to fuel our entrepreneurial economy. And let me conclude with one last chart. This may seem a conundrum, but it's actually very, very interesting. And that is that in the United States we have tremendous job churn. It highlights that our economy destroys nearly as many jobs as it creates each year, about 30 million. That's right, 30 million jobs are destroyed each year, about the same are created. This is creative destruction, and it's a fact of life in the American economy. It is a testament to the incredible ability of our country to destroy and create jobs at an amazing pace as innovation permeates throughout the economy. Other countries find themselves locked and saddled with rigid and flexible labor markets and high unemployment. Now, this job churn is a source of tremendous anxiety, as each lost job represents an individual who's faced with uncertainty for his or her future regarding health care benefits and pension. But what it shows also is the likelihood of this person getting another job, and that likelihood is high. But it's going to be high if they have the skills. And the skills, again, depend on our STEM education, our investments in R&D, accelerating our entrepreneurship, and ensuring that we have a society that has high performance correlation learning. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I urge you to take action on these bills and others in the panoply of competitiveness legislation and concern across the nation right now. And I commend you for your leadership, and I'm pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wince-Smith, and thank all the panel for a very informative hearing here. As I told you earlier, when I introduced H.R. 362 and 363, it wasn't a Democratic bill or Republican bill. I wanted to make it a reflection of rising above the gathering storm, because I wanted to get something done. So I have a couple of questions that I don't want you to think of in a partisan context, but we are at a time now of limited resources, so we've got to get this right. It's going to be hard to come back next year and say we want some more money. And I'm very pleased that with Sherry Bowler and Vern Ellers, they have really prodded the administration to come forth with the President's American Competitiveness agenda, and I'm glad that he has. But there's a couple of differences, and I just want to explore those today. First, in my bills, I put the emphasis on teacher education, trying to improve the capabilities of the new and in-service math teachers. The President's put 70% of his money in K-12 math curriculum. Now, again, I don't want to put you in an awkward position of taking sides. I just want, and I hope there's not really sides here. We're all trying to get to the same place. But I would like to hear from Dr. Barrett and Mr. Augustine on why, in your report, you put such an emphasis on teacher math science education.
I'll begin, and Dr. Barrett can correct me. The National Academy study made 20 specific recommendations with regard to actions to be taken, as you know. Our number one priority was to produce more teachers with degrees in math and science. Our number two recommendation was to double the basic research budget of the nation. The reason we put out of those 20 recommendations the emphasis on math and science teachers was fairly straightforward. Math and science teachers are where the leverage is. Every one of them impacts a large number of students every year. And during the course of a career, you have a multiplying effect that's really quite enormous. We all have experience where teachers change our lives. I certainly was true of me. And so our basic emphasis was on teaching. And we think there's great room for improvement because today the chances of a child having a teacher with a degree or a certificate in math and science is very small. We take a phys ed teacher and tell them to teach physics. And they're intimidated by it. They don't like it. And that's very contagious to the children. Furthermore, we found from anecdotal evidence that young people who are turned off by math and science have been turned off by fourth grade. And so it's those early teachers that are just critically important as well as the ones along the way. And that's why we rated it as number one on our list, Mr. Chairman.
People have been teaching mathematics for centuries. When it is done well, it's done well with a good teacher. It's as simple as that. Qualified, accredited teacher who's motivated can motivate young children to succeed. Organizations like the National Science Foundation have many studies in place and the pedagogy of how to do this. There are all sorts of studies on how to do this. The fundamental is unless you have a good qualified teacher, it doesn't work. So the national academies, I think, recognize that. I think all of us have recognized that in our past. We've all, somewhere in our educational process, have been impacted by a good teacher who has driven us to exceed our own personal expectations of what we can accomplish. That's what we want for every child in the area of mathematics and science. Good teachers come first. They are the magic in the classroom.
Thank you, Dr. Barrett. I was stunned the other day to learn that over 50% of the math teachers in this country have neither a major or a certification to teach math, and over 90% of the physical science teachers have neither a certification or a major. Now, I'm going to abbreviate I'm going to stop here. Let me tell you what's going on, members. If you would just hold your horses just a moment. We're getting ready to have the last votes. I think there are going to be 3 votes, the last votes of the day. I'm sure some of the old-timers on our committee have unfortunately run into this before. What I'd like to do is stop my questioning, let Ranking Member Hall have an opportunity to ask a question, because we have 15 minutes. After that, if the panel members that can stay, if you would adjourn to our cloakroom, there is some I think some sandwiches that could hold you over, and all of the members that can come back, we would appreciate you coming back. Mr. Hall, you're recognized.
For 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
My time's up. I want to extend the chairman's questions about capabilities and who ought to teach it and what area you should begin in. I surely agree with your answers there. I'll ask all of you. I'll ask Mrs. Wince-Smith. So much of what we're talking about today boils down just a simple need to strengthen education and an emphasis on math and science. But the solution doesn't seem to be as easy as producing more people with math and science degrees, because we know that countries like China and countries like India are meeting world demand with probably equally well-educated but a lot lower cost workers. How do we compete with this? And what can our workforce offer in terms of added value to offset skilled but lower cost foreign workers? Because that's a major problem. It's a major problem to pricing our goods after we've taught them how to use the goods or produce the goods. Mrs. Wince-Smith, you have a comment on that, and I'll ask it to anyone.
Well, my comment would be that we aren't going to be able to compete on commoditized work. And the extent to which we will succeed is when we can build higher value around products and services that command a premium globally. And that is why we have to really get a handle on ensuring that all of our children, no matter what fields they go into, have quantitative skills and have the math and science that is infusing virtually all activities. It's not necessarily that they will be research scientists, but in order to perform in any area, you have to have these quantitative skills. And one issue that I would say that I think needs to be out on the table, and perhaps at another hearing I might recommend inviting the very dynamic new head of the American Federation of Teachers Union, Mr. McElroy, because getting some of the reform and innovation in that system is going to be really critical for pay for performance to attract these teachers that have the commitment to teach our young people.
Well, I guess I was hoping I'd hear when you read about the statistics of the number of engineers that China produces that dwarfs our engineers, or even India. I'd like to hear that, well, they're not producing the type engineers, they're not the grade, they're not the quality engineers, they're not complete engineers as we are. I haven't heard that. I'd like to hear it, and Dr. Barrett, maybe you're going to tell me that.
I think we've been perhaps not articulating as clearly as we might. The basic strength the United States has is today certainly not K through 12 education system. Our unassailable strength today is in our research universities, and the quality of the education, the combination of research and education, and the product that they put out, both the student as a product and the research as a product. It's critical to build upon that. It's critical to build upon it with increased funding of those research universities to make them keep them the most competitive in the world. All of the dialogue about K through 12 education is to promote a greater capability in our inherent workforce, and also to provide a greater feedstock, if you will, to our universities and children who are knowledgeable and capable and interested in math and science. We will never compete on quantity alone, and we should not expect that. We have to compete on quality. We have the best universities in the world. It's a national treasure. We ought to do everything to support them.
If I could add to that, I'm glad that Dr. Barrett said it rather than me. But in my travels around the world, in countries like India and China, and compare them with the research universities here in the United States, the strength that we have here is that we integrate education and research so that we're actually teaching young people how to be innovative. We're teaching them to take risks, and that's something that doesn't happen in the rest of the world. All the discussion of science and math teaching training is to continue that pipeline so that when new companies are created from the innovative people that come out of the research universities, those companies have a workforce that can speak the language. But our real strength is our ability to take risk.
I think my time's probably up, but I'm hoping that I hear that the huge numbers of people in China and in India would dwarf our numbers, and we can have an expectation that they would have more in numbers, but hopefully not in quality. And Chairman's hit my knee here just now. I think that my time's up. Now, if it's not up, I want to yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. You're 29 over, but it was a good 29. Mr. Barrett, would you like to try to work in before we go?
Very quickly. First of all, what a distinguished panel we have here today. We're humbled at your presence and grateful for your leadership and work in this. It seems one element that we haven't talked much about that just seems so important is sort of a cultural change in our society. If you talk to the average parent of young people and say, we want them to study more math and science, they'll probably say, that's a good idea. But if those kids come home and say, Mom or Dad, can you help me with my quadratic equations, they'll run screaming from the room and turn on a video game as a distraction. I don't know how we address that, but I'd be very interested in your thoughts about that, trying to change the culture and especially help parents, empower parents to help their kids as the kids take on more difficult subjects than the parents took. That'd be part one. Part two would be, we hear a great deal from industry about the need to expand H-1B visa and limit the cap. I understand the logic for that, but I would also be interested myself in finding some way to link that to increased responsibility on the part of businesses seeking H-1Bs to participate in the endeavor to train our own domestic workforce, so we need to rely less on H-1Bs. I fully understand the need for more H-1Bs, but it seems to perpetuate the problem if the businesses don't also invest in educating our workforce, and I'd welcome any response to that.
Let me try very quickly on both. The most significant thing, in my opinion, to get young children interested in mathematics and science and the knowledge base they'll need for the 21st century is to have teachers who are engaged, knowledgeable, and can enthuse the children with the wonders of the universe. A PE coach teaching physics is not going to hack it. Someone who's teaching mathematics and doesn't understand mathematics is not going to hack it. You need good teachers in the classroom. The second comment is H-1B visa issue. One of the beauties of our university system is that it is the best in the world. It attracts people from all around the world, the best and the brightest. That's why it's a national treasure, the virtual research university. If we're going to invite those people to come to our country, pay for their education at taxpayers' expense, and then require them to go home and compete with us, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I personally think that, when 10 years ago I might have been one of the first to suggest we staple a green card to every advanced degree given to a foreign national from a U.S. university. I still think that that is such a simple law that even Republicans and Democrats can get together to pass it. But aside from that, the effort we're making to improve K through 12 education is to get more kids interested and qualified to study engineering, science, mathematics at the university level to perhaps decrease the need for H-1B visas. But I think the whole debate on H-1B visas and green cards is a good debate for us to be having, because it means we are attracting the best and brightest minds in the world to the United States, which is exactly what we need to be competitive.
Excuse me, we have 1 minute. Someone else want to
Just one brief follow-up. Okay. I agree with that entirely, except that there are companies in my district that are working very hard to be involved in a high school and college education program, and frankly, there are freeloaders. They pay their $1,500, but if you ask them to do anything with the local school district to help out, they're AWOL. And somehow to put some skin in the game for those companies versus just go out and recruit abroad seems to be consistent with your goals here, and I think we might want to try to do a hybrid there. But I appreciate the point.
The committee will be in recess for hopefully no more than not 45 minutes, will it be? Okay. 25. It'll be at least 30 minutes. So we hope that you can stay. In consultation with the minority staff, I have been given permission to start to move on. We are just finishing up votes. Folks will be coming in periodically. It was the last vote of the day, and folks are going to markups in other committees. I also know that some of you have trains, planes, and buses to catch, so permission is not necessary. Please leave as you need to. We are just grateful that you're here today. Let me, I will start off, and I'd like to explore a little bit more and maybe Dr. Lane, the NSF education programs. We were talking earlier. I'm disappointed that they've been cut almost 50% in the last few years. You might explain a little bit about what they do, and then I'd like the committee to give some thought to. I am not anti-Department of Education. I think there's probably a role for both. Maybe we could talk a little bit about how that role in both agencies could help us get our goal. But Dr. Lane, if you would please start and tell us a little bit about those programs and what you have seen as success or failures within those programs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also would want to say I'm not anti-Department of Education either. They have a big job to do. It's a different job from the National Science Foundation. I think that's what you want me to address. The National Science Foundation has this broad mission to ensure the progress of science, engineering, mathematics across the country, and they do that in various ways, and it's not limited to research. It's all about knowledge creation and knowledge transfer, and to people, to and among people, and to the marketplace where things can be applied to benefit the American people in broader ways. So where the NSF, I think, really shines is through its programs to bring innovation to the classroom and to help teachers try new things, help schools try new ways of teaching, summer camps that enable teachers to take the time to get together, learn from one another, new approaches to mathematics, new approaches to curriculum. They've been doing that for decades and decades. And then they got involved in the last 15 years or so in systemic reform of our schools, where they would work in partnership with cities, school districts, cities, states, regions, to not tell the state or the region how to teach, but simply to try to connect what's been learned about pedagogy, what's been learned about teaching and learning with on-site, large-scale experimentation. They have the authority to do that from the Congress. Department of Education cannot really do that. NSF uses peer review to just review and respond to proposals. The best ideas and the best people, the best places get funded, and the other people don't. Department of Education can't really do that. The National Science Foundation has this direct relationship with the best scientists, many of the best scientists, engineering researchers in the country, and can tap into that knowledge base and that experience and those skills to try to help to get that in front of the teachers, help the teachers pick up the passion for science and for learning that they can then pass along with their students. So NSF is about innovation. It's about research. It's about high risk, if you like, taking those kinds of opportunities and investing this money in a way that can then be evaluated and be responsive to the American people. So it's a special agency, I think, in that regard. So it's not that it's better than the Department of Education. It's different and has a different role, which I believe it does very well.
Thank you, Dr. Lane. I know Dr. Dynes and Dr. Barrett's going to have to leave. If you want to make a swan song, and then you could be excused.
Well, let me address this issue first. A swan song? No, I'm not ready for my swan song,
Okay.
Chairman. But let me say something that I've said before, and I really believe this, and that is the strength of the American universities is that we integrate education and research. Those two are coupled together, and the more I've traveled in China and India, the more I've seen that until they learn to copy that, they're going to be behind us. And we should be leading with our strengths, and that is our strength. And insofar as the NSF nurtures that part of our mission, it's an important place to put resources. It's not that it's I'm opposed to the Department of Department of Education. I have energy on the mind. The Department of Education, they have a very, very important mission, but we can't lose sight of the integration of what we've learned in our research transferring to education. And with that, I will bid adieu and pledge my support for these bills.
Again, thank you for making a coastal hit and run. Would anyone else like to address that topic? If not, I'm going to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Lamson, chairman of our Energy Subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember sitting in this room a few years back in another life and listening to testimony from one of our federal agencies about what we could do to keep employees at that agency. And most of the things that were being talked about were financial incentives. And I got up and walked down from here and sat out in the midst of a bunch of students who I asked, huddled them up and said, if y'all were testifying right now, what would you say? And almost to a person, it wouldn't be about money, it would be about giving us something to dream that we can achieve. Give us something to work on that gives us satisfaction to know that we're accomplishing something with our lives. So, and another part of that is that my youngest daughter just quit her 6th grade math teaching. She was teaching math, honors math classes, and she's left that. But how do we tackle the problem that teaching isn't an attractive career option in the United States? The work is hard, the pay is low compared to what a strong math and science student can make outside of teaching. What national policy actions can turn the tide on this?
I'll take a crack at that one, if I may. Certainly one of the significant problems we face in encouraging young people to teach and to remain teachers is the compensation issue. And it seems to be a failing of our free enterprise system that, at least in my judgment, we undervalue teachers, nurses, and soldiers, and overvalue CEOs and rock stars, athletes, and so on. And that's something you probably won't solve with legislation, or will I solve by talking about it. I think there are 2 things I would just add or suggest. One is with regard to compensation. I don't think we'll change the basic compensation structure of the nation, but I do think that it's possible to offer some incentives to teachers at the federal level, and we propose some of these in Rising Above the Gathering Storm. There are other, the program that's going to be sponsored by ExxonMobil has some incentives for teachers and for students in it that make a bit of a difference to the math and science teacher, to the good teacher, to the one that remains for a long time. The other thing I would say is that we who are scientists and engineers, I'm an engineer, have failed to convey to young people the excitement of what we do. And part of that is that the teachers in the lower grades who are not scientists and engineers don't have that fire, that passion. I look at my own career. I played a very small part, I mean a small part, in sending 12 of my friends to the moon and bringing it back. I mean, how good does it get? How many people can say that they did something like that in their life? I mean, that's heavy. And we need to convey that kind of thing to young people, that this is exciting. Certainly we need to pay a decent wage, but we don't want teachers either that are there for the money.
The Gathering Storm report emphasizes the need for increased funding for research in physical sciences, which I used to teach, computer science, engineering, and math. Why are these subjects seen as priority areas, and should funding be diverted from other fields?
I'll address that from the Gathering Storm report, and then my colleagues, I'm sure, would care to add. Basically, we looked at a large number of studies that showed that the growth in the gross domestic product in America in the last half century was from 50% to 85% attributable to math and science. We found that the creation of new jobs were attributable to math and science. The return on equity from investments in math and science were huge. And so basically what we have a shortage of is mathematicians and scientists and engineers, candidly not of lawyers and accountants and CEOs and athletes. And so that's why we don't underestimate for a minute the importance of reading. I attended a liberal arts school to study engineering, and I did it for a reason. But today, America's future is going to depend on our prowess in math and science to a very large degree.
Anyone else want to make a comment? My time is just about up, and Ms. Wince-Smith first, and then...
And I would offer as a model what's going on in our military academies, which I think have a very, very advanced process for how they're fusing math, science, and engineering with the liberal arts and humanities and languages. And so you have young people that no matter what field they're going to go into, whether it's history or languages, they also are coming out with engineering degrees. So what Norm was saying about, infusing more math and science and engineering into the traditional undergraduate liberal arts curriculum in our four-year colleges, I think is very, very important. And the other thing that I would want to add on the teacher issue is I really do think we have to have some flexibility now to tap on the tremendous resources of people who are now in their 50s, 60s that want to give back and are willing to come in and teach in schools. I mean, I know in my case, I had a math teacher that was 70 years old who'd retired from Goodyear Rubber Company, and, he was teaching junior girls in a little girls' school. We were doing advanced calculus, and, we loved it. We loved having him there. So, that's not really allowed in most of our schools today. So we don't have that flexibility, and we're losing a whole cadre of people who have the skills and the love, and they'd like to be with young people.
Thanks. Mr. Chairman, can Dr. Barrett and Dr. Lane both respond?
Two quick comments. I think the concept of meritocracy in the K-12 public school system is absolutely needed, and that's a pay-for-performance issue. Higher performance of teachers, they ought to get paid more for it, as opposed to just for time and service. And I think every example where that's been used shows that, and every study of the education system has suggested that as a way to motivate more people to participate in the K-12 teaching area. As far as the areas that the Rising Above the Gathering Storm singled out for increased R&D spending, I think that those are the fundamental areas that have been driving the U.S. economy for the last half century, and they're also the areas where the funding has been flat in an absolute dollar standpoint for the last 2 or 3 decades. So in essence, they've been defunded over the last 20 years on the basis that the funding's been flat and inflation's eaten into the investment in those areas.
Fine.
Mr. Lamson, on the issue of teacher respect, let me just mention something I think you know that we're doing in Texas. The Texas Academy of Medicine, Engineering, and Science, institution that really was stimulated by the interest of Senator K. Bailey Hutchinson, has taken on an education project, really being prompted by the Gathering Storm report. And the way they're addressing, we don't know how they're going to address K-12 education in general. They're just starting to have a look at it. But one thing they're doing is bringing teachers from the schools into contact with Nobel laureates, members of the national academies at their annual meetings, and having them sit and dine with them, hearing from them and their comments, making it clear that the scientists and engineers, the technical professionals, believe these people are important, that they've got an important job to do, and they care about what their problems are. So it doesn't involve any money in that particular case. I completely agree with Dr. Barrett in terms of merit salary considerations. This is yet a different kind of thing that one can also do just to show you care, just to show it makes a difference.
There's a program, Mr. Chairman, at NASA that had to do with a camera on the International Space Station that could be operated by elementary school students. That program, which was a minimal or almost no cost, is going to go away. And finding simple little things like that, I believe, adds to the opportunities that teachers have to inspire young children at the ages that we need them to be inspired. Thank you very much for your extra time.
Thank you.
And thanks to the panel.
Gentleman's time has expired. Looking to my right, I see no one, so Mr. Lipinski, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing and bringing together this panel. Thank you all for your testimony. It is really an issue that hits close to my heart, but unfortunately, I just felt a little guilty there. Mr. Augustine was talking about for example, engineers have to let young people know, the excitement of their profession. And every time I hear something like that, I think about the fact that I left engineering behind to go into political science, and then to come here, and I sort of feel guilty that maybe I'm not talking about that excitement of being an engineer, although it just didn't turn out to be what the road that I was gonna go down. But I always think that education was the best education I could have gotten. One thing in Mr. McGraw's testimony, you had said that the key to America's competitiveness challenge is innovation. And there's a bill that we passed on House floor yesterday that I authored to help the metals industry, steel, aluminum, other metals industries, by providing federal funding that would go to colleges, universities, other research institutions, and it would be matched. It was a 70% federal, 30% industry match to do research and spur innovation for the metals industry to be able to be more efficient, more environmentally friendly. And I think this is a rather unique way of going about funding R&D. I mean, is this something that you think is a good way of going about it, is a good example of what we can be doing?
I think it's a start on that one. I think if you take a look at most successful companies, especially on the technology side, they're doing a tremendous amount of cooperative alliances with various research universities, university labs, and the like. And so anything that will tie the academic, and the business world together, usually use most innovative and most creative. So anything that would spur that, I would think would be a good thing.
And do you think this is lacking right now, or do you think there's any other ways we can incentivize this, or is this not the best direction to go in terms of innovation?
I think you're either going to go there or you're going to be gone. It's going to be very difficult to survive in this kind of global environment with the kind of competition you're facing if you're not innovating. And I think you want to take a look at any company in terms of how they're using their free cash flow, how do they generate free cash flow, and then what are they doing with it. Now, I think we've gotten to a point where we've over financial engineered, some of our organizations, and I think some of the climate, that augurs well for the short term and less for the longer term, puts certain public companies, in a very bad light. And it is key, and you want to take a look at what a company is generating in terms of organic growth. And I would say to you that for basic industry today, organic growth is way too low, and that's a result of the business climate and the environment and the financial markets, and less of a willingness to take risk and so forth. So, yeah.
And so it leads into my next question. Recently, BP gave a $500 million grant to build and operate an Energy Biosciences Institute. And unfortunately, Dr. Dynes not here anymore for me to compliment Berkeley, both University of California, Berkeley, and the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, along with the University of Illinois, have a partnership that was awarded this $500 million grant. They're going to research biomass. What else can we do to incentivize this type of grant giving, this kind of work by private companies to help further with innovation?
On the energy sector, you're using the BP example? Well,
or anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, for a public company, you have to have enough balance within your overall business portfolio such that you can take those kind of risks. And eventually, you have got to get returns. So when you start talking about a $500 million fund that BP is talking about, actually, not a very good example. They have not done a very good job at investing in the alternatives, and yet their core infrastructure in terms of some of their oil and gas abilities has not gone very well. They haven't reinvested in some of the existing equipment on that one. But to encourage, incentivize people that way, you've got to have a path towards a return. Otherwise, a public company, is going to be less inclined to do that.
Dr. Barrett?
The gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Robacher is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to congratulate you on just getting a running start in your new job as chairman with this legislation. And I like the idea that you are moving forward trying to provide a benefit, educational benefit, but at the same time requiring some kind of service in exchange for the benefit, which I think is something that will actually be a twofer. Whenever you move forward, you should at least try for a twofer when you're here on this job. We're not only helping some young person get an education, but we're also providing perhaps a service to schools that need a science or engineering or mathematics teacher. We're providing them someone who could help them for a few years. So I'll be looking very closely at this legislation to see if it's exactly what I can support, but it certainly going in the right direction. We'll see. With that, a couple times during the testimony, I couldn't help but hear, and maybe Mr. Bilberry may have already brought this up, I couldn't help but hear overhand just sort of shoved into the discussion concepts like H-1B visas and getting students from overseas here. Let me just note that when you take a look at the supply and demand and wages and things like that, the very last thing we need to do to encourage our young people to get involved in science, mathematics, or engineering is to provide the hundreds of thousands of H-1B visas which are being asked for business in order to keep down wages. Every time we turn around, you're saying we need to get more immigrants into this society to do those jobs that Americans won't do. Well, we're talking about jobs that are high-paying jobs that Americans should want to do, and the very last thing you need to do is bring the pay level down on those jobs or put a lid on it by having more people come in from overseas. So I would submit that as just for the record as something that if we can talk about giving, providing more classroom and more classes and more science teachers, but unless the kids know that in high school in particular, that there are good jobs that are available that they can afford to live in a nice home and raise their family, as compared to just people who want to be lawyers all the time. All the lawyers end up in the nice houses, and the engineers end up not being able to be renters someplace in a place that's not so nice. You're not going to get more quality young people into that profession. So again, I think the secret, Mr. Chairman, that people always overlook because it requires coming up against power structures is pay more money to engineers and scientists and mathematicians, pay more money to science, mathematics, and engineering teachers, and you're going to get more of them. And if you insist on having basket weaving and gymnasium teachers getting the same amount of money as someone who's teaching engineering and math, then you're not going to have the quality people that you want. I mean, it just comes down to that. One last note, and again, it was just sort of thrown in here about, and I think it was Mr. McGraw mentioned it, but maybe might have mentioned as well, something about, we don't want kids to drop out of college. We want kids to get that bachelor's degree or the AA degree from a junior college. In my area, we've got a junior college of 20,000 kids. They only have 180 kids in that program who are involved in the nursing or healthcare training program. Yet, all the kids who end up getting out or going on to get a BA, they can get great jobs at $30,000 or $35,000 when they get out. But if they get trained as a healthcare person, they can end up getting a $50,000 to $60,000 a year job. So I would submit that we need to be training our young people for jobs that are going to give them a good livelihood and jobs that are necessary and pay well, as compared to just try to, oh, everybody's needs a BA. Well, I don't think everybody does need a BA. I think we need to get some training in there, and anyway, those are some thoughts. Be happy to have the panel shoot me down or whatever.
Well, let me take a quick crack. You know, it's and I would hope, Mr. Chairman, that you could find a bridge, to the education agenda, because I think there would be a lot of shared thoughts that could be very helpful. But you're talking about, a landscape that's very, very different. When we're talking about dropout rates, we're talking about in our inner city schools, our largest inner city schools, 45 to 50% dropouts.
Oh, I thought you were talking about college and
yeah, college as well. But I'm coming back to your saying, let's get more teachers and all that. There's so many things that go into, so many socioeconomic things that go into why, that is. But I come back to a comment that we were talking offline with the chairman about, and that is that if you really want to get after a more serious rigor, and we're not just talking, the highest level of scholar and science achievement, we're talking about math and science skills at the high school level so that you're proficient. Then you've got to focus on reading, because the problems are all coming back to reading. And that's why you see all of the emphasis in the early parts of No Child Left Behind focused on the reading achievement. Because if you lose after a year, if I lose a student after a year, I probably lost them. And if it's 2 years, it's done on that part. And what we're finding now is that it's not just at the early childhood learning aspect, it is at the middle school in particular, because most of those people are coming in now with reading deficiencies that can't get them into the other disciplines. They can't get into the higher math and the highest science, and they don't have those comprehension levels. So the focus has got to be on reading to get to higher math and science capabilities. One of the things that was very disappointing in the NAEPS test that we mentioned, 35% of seniors in this country, that are graduating, are not proficient, or 35% are proficient in reading. The rest not on that one. At math, it was 23% are proficient. I mean, these are horrible, outcomes for, where we are as an advanced nation, and we have to do a better job. But I would come back to you that the first thing that we have to focus on is the reading capability.
The gentleman's time has expired. I think Mr. Barrett wanted to address Mr. Lipinski, but we're going to wait just a moment. The patient, Ms. Guilford, has been here for quite a while, and I warn you, she's ready. She has a copy of the Gathering Storm, and it's even tabbed and underlined. So she has taken her assignment very well.
Chairman, of all the committee hearings that I believe we're going to have this year, I honestly think this is probably the most important one. And so I just want to appreciate you all being here. This is really important. It's really serious stuff that we're talking about. And I just commend you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing the panel together and continuing to highlight that this document is one of the most important documents that this Congress is going to face. It really is serious, this brewing crisis we have. Quick story, I was in Scotland a couple of years ago, actually with a group called the Global Enterprise Challenge, which are young high school kids that are tasked to put together an entrepreneurial program all across the world. Groups from South Africa to Antarctica, I mean, literally all over the planet, these high school groups competing. It was fantastic. And I met with a woman named Lady Strathmore, related to the royal family, who told me about this wonderful woman in Arizona, Barbara Barrett. So you even have to sometimes go to the other side of the world to learn about some of the resources that you have in your own home state. So it's good to see you, Dr. Barrett. I'm going to just throw out a couple of questions. It's hard with 5 minutes, but these are issues that are important to Arizona that are not addressed in the document, and I just want to know whether or not you've taken any issues into consideration. Our world is different. When I look back to the 1960s, 1970s, President Kennedy's vision, sending a man to the moon, why we pushed forward in innovation, those days are gone. Families are no longer like those families. Our schools are different. Our society is really different. So in a lot of ways, we're looking at a totally different world. In Arizona, the proficiency in terms of just English, the proficiency in just literacy levels, the whole world is different. The family structure is different. So my first question I have is, what is going to be the new Apollo mission?
I believe it could be energy. I mean, I keep trying to get people excited about the ways that we heat and cool our homes and we move around this planet. I really think that we could get that next generation of kids excited about that. But I'm curious whether or not, if you all as a group have thought about that spark, something that is really going to stimulate, young people's minds. The second question, and I don't think this is addressed in the document, is early childhood development. All the data and research that I've seen shows that if you don't get kids at the really early levels, I'm not saying it doesn't matter what you do K through 12, because it does, but if you don't get the 0 through 3, the 0 through 5, it's tough to go back and take those minds and do the developmental work that needs to be done. Third question, and there was an article just a couple days ago in the paper about this, women working in the United States, where other industrialized societies have realized that population growth is decreasing because more women are deciding to have a career. I'm a good example of that. So with that, with professional women now choosing not to have children, we see populations declining, but not a big move by this government to realize that if we want professional people to have children, then we're going to have to make some accommodations in the workforce, because you just can't have it all. So that's my third point. And fourth point, as we know, girls tend to drop off in math and science at about the 6th, 7th grade. I don't believe this document really addresses what we can do for that next generation of really targeting girls in math and science and re-examining what we can do in that arena.
Can I try real quickly?
Go ahead, Craig.
Arizona resident.
Here.
Right on energy. Energy is a math, science, engineering intensive problem. If the U.S. wanted to be independent from its energy requirements, it could mount a program. It's a softball waiting to be hit by either party. I'm surprised it hasn't been hit to date. Second, there have been many interesting studies about early childhood development, and the latest one that I've seen is all-day kindergarten versus not. By the 3rd grade, it's a wash. It turns out the longer kids stay in the K through 12 education system, the worse they do. You either have to fix the K through 12 education system ultimately, or it's a perfect filter. It filters out the kids that we want to succeed in math and science going forward. So there's not a simple answer anywhere, but there are things that I think the United States could rally around. The Gathering Storm suggested the DARPA energy focus, primarily because we thought energy could be a national focus to get kids, and the political air cover to get kids interested in math and science going forward.
I might just add to that, you asked a group of really good questions. What could be the spark? I agree with Craig, and that was the view of the National Academies, was that energy is the issue, because not only is it heavily dependent on the kind of math and science we were promoting, but as you know, it affects everything from the environment to the economy to national security and down the line. With regard to your point about impacting children at an early age, that's critical. We found that children were lost to math and science by the time they're in 4th grade very often. We can't, I'm afraid, count on parents. Today, parents of high school children, 70% of the parents believe that the math and science they're getting is quite adequate. Parents are very comfortable. I think it has to be the teachers and the schools that are going to provide that spark. And again, if we could bring people in that would teach those younger children, and I think there are a lot of people who would do that. In my own case, when I took early retirement so I could teach, but I couldn't teach in our public schools. I can't teach 4th graders, so I taught engineering at Princeton instead. It seems like there's something wrong with that. And my last comment is to strongly endorse your remark about women. Women are 18% of the engineers in this country, engineering graduates. If minorities are far more underrepresented, less than 5%. And if we're going to compete in this world-class market with over half of our population not participants, it's a handicap we can't endure.
Dr. Lane, it looked like you might have a comment, and then I'll call on Mr. Ross.
Let me mention this because we haven't mentioned the word technology.
in the context of education, I think, in this hearing yet. And Ms. Giffords, among the many things that have changed in the environment that our young people are growing up in is technology. And so, my little grandkids and medium grandkids, they talk on cell phones and they have computers and they do all that stuff. I'm connected with a not-for-profit in Texas called Reasoning Mind that has an extraordinarily exciting online math technology availability that we're experimenting with in Houston, and it's had wonderful success. It has an on-screen little genie, helpful. It addresses all kinds of different levels. My point about it is that we do, of course, need wonderful teachers, and we need more of them than we have right now. But we're probably never going to have enough of those teachers, but what they don't need, that some of the tools that technology can deliver. We haven't had great success getting technology in the classroom. I think, though, we should not ignore the fact that our young people are growing up in that kind of environment, and there are some tools I think can be provided to even the best teachers to enable them to reach more students than they're currently able to do. So I put in a plug for the more innovative technologies that we can find to support.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rothman, I'm going to let Mr. Rothman proceed. Did you feel like Ms. Wince?
Oh, well, I just wanted to comment on the issue of women. And there is an initiative underway that has tremendous outcome metrics now for encouraging women to actually be involved in this entrepreneurial economy that I talked about, and that's Professional Science Masters. And these are programs that a number of schools are starting. Georgia Tech has one that's fantastic. So women and minorities are getting, in terms of the numbers, very high numbers of these degrees. For instance, in the Georgia Tech arena, they have a degree in nano device fabrication. And then they have accounting, business, all the skills you need to actually go out and take this knowledge and create something and deploy it into commercial value. And it's very interesting when you look at the trends that the majority of graduates of Professional Science Masters are women and minorities. So something's going on there that is enabling a very systemic type of thinking and also the skills that you need to go out and create something in the business world. So I would urge you to look at Professional Science Masters and particularly the linkages with women.
Mr. Rothman?
Thank you. First, let me apologize for being late. I have 3 hearings scheduled at the same time. I'm sure I'm not unusual in that regard with the rest of my colleagues, so I apologize for being late, and if I'm about to ask a question that you've already answered. And I hope it's not too far afield from this subject, but you're all great scholars and successful people, so I thought I'd ask you. Is there something about our culture, our American culture, that is preventing greater success in our public education system? And if you have any thoughts on that subject, I'd like to know, or any suggestions as to what we can do to counter either the negative trends in our culture or to enhance the positive aspects of our culture that would improve the educational performance of our student body. That's number one. Number two, depending on what you read, you have people saying, oh, we're doing just fine. Our expectations are too high to expect PhDs from every single one of our children, and everything's just swell. I'd like to have your thoughts on that. And the third thing is the role of parents. I have 5 kids now, and the role of parents, I think, is critical, but not everyone has the luxury of spending the time with their kids or coming in and becoming a part of the school family, school community that raises the expectation level for the teachers and administrators, as well as their own children. So what do you do about those kids whose families don't have that extra time to devote?
Well, first of all, the educational system in the United States worked. And it gave us the largest economy in the world. It gave us technological excellence. It gave us the highest productivity levels. And so it worked. The issue and what changed was a world grew up. And what we're seeing is a global economy in works with increasing worldwide competition. And we've come to the realization that we have to bring more people along, better skills, better capability, and we've taken our foot off the accelerator, and we got to put it back on. And you just aren't going to do that overnight. And that's why programs like H-1B visas or anything in the short term to be able to jumpstart some of these things is very important. I think it's a conversation we had a little earlier. It was governors in the 80s that were running deficits in some of their large cities in their state. And it was them that was to survive politically. It was about achieving economic growth. And if it was about achieving economic growth, it was reaching out to the private sector. It was about jobs. It was about the right kind of skill sets. And therefore, it was about your education system. That's the first time that the achievement of economic growth and the education system has been linked on that one. So the system, has been in reform really only a very short period of time. And now with the realities, of what we're facing in terms of a world competition, we've got to get moving again. And so a lot of these things are wake-up calls into it. I think 362 is, 363 is. On this one. But again, the tie the chairman was talking about back to the education agenda, the problems are enormous. In 1997, only a third of the states had academic standards. No Child Left Behind, which was fabulous in terms of landmark legislation. Is it perfect? Does it put all the weights in the right spots? Does it do that? No, but it got started aligning federal, state, and local education standards. Today, all 50 states, have academic standards. It wouldn't be nice if some of them were more common, but all 50 have them. And what you're starting to see in terms of instruction is that standardized instruction is starting to go up, which means you're coalescing around academic standards. In other words, I'm going to buy reading materials for every class in every school, and we're going to get behind research-based, proven-to-work kinds of product on that way. There's no way to have everybody doing things in different fashions. You can do remedial and intervention, but you're going to get to more standardized instruction. So I think it's pretty clear that if you fast forward, we're on a path right now that you're starting to see all the concerns and all of the new thinking starting to take place. But it's going to take us a while. It's just not a bad idea. That's why I think some of the comments about alternative certification. I mean, the fact that Norm can't teach a fourth grade class. We've got to get into those kinds of issues. We have to encourage people that have done well, to find other ways to give back as we all live longer. Another source on all that. So the other one is that you got to tie it to the job market. We can talk about math and science at the high school level and having those kind of competencies. You can talk about scholarly work at the National Science Foundation and the like. But in terms of getting those capabilities, you've really got to tie it to a job market. And I think the comment about churn was so right. Every 3 months, we lose 7 to 8 million jobs. Every 3 months, we gain 7 to 8 million jobs. Change is taking place so quickly that skills have got to be able to match some of those new capabilities.
The gentleman's time has expired. Does anyone else on the committee want to take on that monumental? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think it's interesting to link this question also to regional economic development, because throughout the country now, for the first time, we're beginning to see an alignment between investments in workforce skills. We're spending about $15 billion going after workforce boards, with what's going on in the public education system with economic development strategy, because people are choosing to live and stay and work and build their lives in communities where there are high-performing schools. And so that's becoming a very important asset for not just keeping people, but also attracting within our country people to want to live and work in areas that are considered high-value entrepreneurial activities. So the area that I think is the Achilles heel to all of this is how much localization do you have in determining these standards and performance. I mean, if you look at the current school system and you compare it to any private enterprise, you know, the productivity levels, I mean, we're spending more per child than any other country but Switzerland. You know, what is it? It's approaching $600 billion. And yet, again, in terms of these outcomes, we're not really seeing that. So I think the school boards, you know, have to really take some ownership here. I mean, they're approving contracts. They're approving the contracts for teachers who have no math, science skills, but are teaching math and science. And the parents then are on these school boards. So it's a whole continuum. And I think until communities come together in an integrated way, we're going to continue to see these things being looked at in stovepipes. And that's very bad for the country and for our children.
Mr. Augustine.
Well, I'll be very brief. You mentioned three issues, really: culture, parents, and expectations. My view is that the culture has changed, and it ties in with parents. My parents never had the opportunity to go to college. Obviously, neither were scientists or engineers, but they darn well understood the importance of an education, and they made it clear to me. Another cultural change that somehow has been missed in all this is that the great teachers I had were almost all women. Today, those teachers are probably lawyers and doctors and bankers. In those days, they didn't have much choice other than to be teachers, and that's been a profound change that you don't hear much about. Culture becomes a matter of priority to a very great degree. Our children, many of them, place more emphasis on being a great athlete than a great student. Our society promotes that. About 2 years ago, I was visiting Asia, in a country that had just been hit by the tsunami. Wreckage everywhere, but there's a school outdoors in the jungle, hotter than could be. 10-year-old children sitting there 8 hours a day going to school. We probably wouldn't have seen that here. With regard to expectations, clearly the intent of the academies was not to promote huge numbers of PhDs. The thought was the importance of PhDs is they do the basic research that's going to create jobs for the rest of us. But the rest of us have got to be at least articulate enough to understand fundamental math and science. So that's my attempt at a brief answer to the three very tough questions.
I think Mr. Bilby was here most recently, but Mr. Bartlett was here earlier, and so Mr. Bartlett, we yield to you for 5 minutes.
I'm on? Okay. Apologize for not being here during the question. I don't know whether this issue has come up or not. I think the really big challenge we face is a cultural one. What you're proposing is fine. These two bills are okay, but they really won't solve our problem. A society gets what it appreciates, and we just do not appreciate people who are in these technical areas. A bright young guy is now called, when I was in school studying science, we were, squares? Now they're geeks and nerds, and pretty girls have to play, bright girls have to play dumb to get a date. I think that I will have some confidence that the culture is changing when the White House invites academic achievers in them and fawns all over them the way they do sports figures. Clearly what we need is an appreciation of the contribution that these professions make in our society. It just isn't there. And what concerns me is that it is there in countries like China and India. They're going to eat our lunch if we aren't careful. China this year will graduate they will graduate more English-speaking engineers than we graduate. About half of our English-speaking engineers are Chinese students. What can we do to change the culture in our country? Because that's the real problem. I remember when we put a man on the moon, and there was a little cartoon that came out which just said the whole thing. Little buck-toothed, freckle-faced young fellow, and he said 6 months ago I couldn't even spell engineer, and now I are one. Everybody wanted to be in this because it was culturally the thing to do, and it was really appreciated. What can we do to change the culture? Because all these other things are just nibbling at the margins, Mr. Chairman. Until we change the culture, we're not going to get there. What can we do to change the culture?
Dr. Lane.
Well, I don't want to make a political comment in a place like this, but you mentioned President Kennedy. I believe the American people are looking for vision and leadership of that kind. I mean, we'll have a chance, we have elections coming up, we'll have a chance to see whether such a leader emerges or not, but I really believe the people, with all the changes that have occurred, I think there's still at a fundamental level, there's an anxiousness on the part of the American people to find an exciting idea, an individual they can really follow, where the case kind of makes itself, and maybe maybe the answer will be around something like energy and environment. I don't know what the issues will be, but it's going to require, I think, leadership at the highest levels in our government, in our branches of government. And, you know, again, I applaud you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership, and the room is full of leaders now and in the past attempting to do that. I think we need that. I'm looking for that. I think that's what's going to help my grandkids that I talked about earlier in my testimony. And I'm not sure what short of that actually would cause the entire country to begin to move in a different direction.
Would Gentleman Neal?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Lane, would it be the time then for somebody to come riding in on a great big beautiful white horse, knowledgeable, with a track record, solid citizen, leader, handsome.
I think Ralph's announcing.
Success. Totally successful. Has been appointed by every president to lead studies. Has been a leader in everything that's good and successful and wholesome for the United States of America. It's that time for Norm Augustine to make his announcement. We're looking for an Eisenhower somewhere now.
I second that nomination.
I yield back my time.
Thanks. I just wanted to note that if having a lot of descendants makes you more cognizant of the problems we face. We have 10 children and 15 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. And I'm here because I was concerned that the world I grew up in, the United States I grew up in, was not going to be the United States they were going to live in. We have too darn much government. It regulates too much. It taxes too much. And we don't have enough respect for careers in these technical areas. And, you know, help us decide what we can do here in the Congress to make this change. Leadership is really, really what we need, Mr. Chairman. We can do some things from the Congress, but, you know, we really need that leadership in the highest levels of government. They're enormously more effective than we are.
The gentleman's time expired. Mr. Bilber is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Maybe we'll start having television shows about engineers rather than lawyers then, Mr. Chairman. I think that the perception of the cultural challenges we face, but I mean, I just say that because let's face it, how many engineers shows have you seen over the last 30 years and how many about lawyers? And frankly, if you look at where our kids are going, they're following the cultural line. I just have to point out that when we talk about the culture, the 57 Sputnik created a urgency and a perception of threat. And we responded to that urgency, that perception of threat, and that the people working, becoming engineers then, were perceived as being the guy who may save America from the great red horde that was coming. And it was a misperception that somehow the race for space was about national defense. But that aside, let me sort of move back to some of the discussion. I got a question here. I come from San Diego County. I I have the high techies in my district, and I've seen where the cooperation between educational institutions and the private sector has been a huge breakthrough. In fact, let me just throw an item there. There's a classic example, one of the few locations where I see that academia doesn't think it's illegitimate to aim straight for economic opportunity from an education. There's too much, I think, in academia that somehow they need to be above the economic realities, and jobs should be a secondary issue, not the primary. But I think that if you look at our universities and their cooperation with the private sector, it's been a big plus. Mr. Chairman, there's another big plus that isn't used, and that's building on the success that we have in San Diego of the spin-offs of those who are in the military who have learned engineering, learned a lot of this kind of high-tech stuff with federal funds, and actually have gone in and filled the gaps in our economic need for these opportunities with the private sector. I just want to ask you, along with that high-tech, we have biotech. And if we look at the challenge of of alternative fuels, though in the past providing the fueling America took civic engineers and geologists, the future may be biologists. That genetically altered enzymes may be the secret to developing fuel independence that we don't know about. Is there a reason why the life sciences hasn't been highlighted here?
I'd be glad to comment on that. With regard to the National Academy's work, we view the life sciences as absolutely of enormous importance, not only for the reason you cite, but their impact on health sciences and many other things. The reason we did not emphasize it was due to the good work of this committee and others. In recent years, we saw a doubling of the budget in the health sciences, the biosciences, whereas the physical sciences, math, engineering have been flat in real terms. And so we felt it was time to give the physical sciences, math, and engineering the same emphasis that the biosciences has already received. And we've been very careful to always say that we don't want this to be at the expense of the biosciences, that to let them atrophy by not accounting for inflation or to not increase their budgets would be a real mistake. We're just now reaping the benefits of that huge growth in the budgets for the biosciences. So in no way do we diminish the importance of those sciences. It's just that the physical sciences were just left out for the last 20 years.
Okay, let's talk the H-1Bs. You know, there's the issue. My colleague from the other half of the surfing caucus, Mr. Dana Robacher, was pointing out the threat of H-1Bs on employment opportunities for certain groups. It's kind of interesting, Mr. Chairman, that when it is an engineer and a college graduate who may have their jobs threatened with an immigration policy, they come unglued. If it's blue-collar working people, it's not a big issue. I think there's a real opportunity here, though, to expand the H-1Bs within the realm of logical immigration policy. And a good example is the fact that we have a thing called, and I would ask the chairman to really look at this, the lottery, the immigration lottery, which is really let's see who comes up with the lottery. 55,000 a year, people without any qualifications that we need in this country, people coming from countries that are the highest risk for terrorism. And I think this is one place that this committee and judiciary ought to sit down and say, is it logical for this country to set aside 55,000 slots for somebody that we don't identify we need when we have H-1Bs over here that aren't being serviced? And maybe we want to shift our priorities and say, first priority should be to what America needs first. And then, and only then, after that, do we talk about what somebody in a foreign country may want to immigrate or may not want to immigrate. And I think, I just ask comment on that, is setting these priorities within the existing immigration policy. Do you guys agree that we ought to be more aggressive about looking for those opportunities?
I would comment on that because I think beyond the HB1 visa, in particular technical skills, we should be looking for highly skilled people across a whole range to come in. And when I mentioned earlier, that was really the discussion this morning around capital markets, that our immigration policy overall is one that's not relevant to what we need for the 21st century. And of course, there's a humanitarian issue that is part of being American, but I would agree with you that there ought to be some look at that. The other thing I wanted to make a comment on, and maybe colleagues from industry could answer this. I've spoken before about the shortage of engineers and what's going on in China. I was recently to a group of investors in New York, and they said, well, what you're saying is completely poppycock. Because if we needed engineers so much, why aren't they being paid? Why aren't they getting the salaries? Why aren't companies paying them? Why aren't they paying scientists and engineers the same kinds of signing bonuses that lawyers get? And I didn't really have the answer to that. So I don't know what is the answer.
They're being outsourced because of as Mr. Augustine pointed out, the world is flat. Get it on the internet. That's the problem that we're having.
If they're lower value engineers, but the higher ones, the ones that have PhDs and things, I didn't have the answer.
But I think it is true what you say. Engineering, like many other things, is being commoditized on a world basis. And the salaries of engineers are being determined more and more by what engineers in India can be bought for, or in China. And that's not going to just be true of engineers. That's going to be true of a lot of other people before we're done here.
The gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Barrett was shortchanged a little earlier, and so I would like to recognize him again.
Thanks very much, and I appreciate the panelists for coming back after the delay. Sorry about the interruption. But, it occurs to me, Mr. Chair, many of us have talked about culture, Mr. Bartlett did. I think we might want to look at our own house. It would be troubling, I would warrant, that if we were to look at the number of memorial resolutions we pass under suspensions honoring sports teams, movie stars, etc., versus scientists, engineers, and teachers, it would be a symptomatic disproportion. So we may be guilty of it as well. Dr. Augustine, I was very interested in a couple of things, and these are both potentially controversial, but I'm going to put them out for actually any of the panelists. One is, there's a brief allusion in Beyond the Gathering Storm to the possibility of a voluntary national curriculum in the sciences. I'm actually pretty intrigued in that. We have school districts in my district that have 40% turnover every year. So you've got a kid who comes in one year, they're gone the next. And ironically, under No Child Left Behind, they somehow may be failing, even though 40% of the kids haven't been in the district. But setting that aside, every time they move districts, move states, they may have to somehow get into a different sequence of education, a different textbook, etc. And I'd be interested in your thoughts about the inefficiencies there. That's point one. The second question, and this is really possibly a third rail, is it's clear to me almost by definition that at some level the colleges of education are not doing the job of turning out qualified teachers. And we tend not to talk about it. It may be an easy target and overly convenient, but I wonder, I know that there seems to be an increasing awareness that we need to involve the disciplinary colleges in the sciences in coordination with the colleges of education. But I don't think the colleges of education alone can do this for a variety of reasons, and I'd open up both of those topics to the panelists for their commentary.
I'll be glad to start. Those are two very good questions. With regard to the voluntary curriculum, the reason we proposed that is that it was our observation that within math and science, the curricula in many school systems is frankly not very good, not very demanding. And we thought that math and science lends itself to a standardized curriculum. And frankly, I'd never thought of until you just mentioned it, the impact on the mobile society. It's a very important secondary impact that I guess we overlooked. With regard to the colleges of education, our proposal was that through competitive scholarships, we find young people who want to study math and science and in return agree to teach for 5 years with the hope they'll stay beyond that. And that's our way to get around the fact that many of the students in the College of Education just aren't interested in math and science. We like to give incentives to infuse those children into those fields.
Yeah, they are very good questions, and they're very thorny because of the way things are funded. On that one, we've already started to see experimentation in standardized instruction, but the issues that you raise in our inner city schools, and because of some of the housing requirements even, what you're seeing is just a tremendous amount of churn. And if you don't have any kind of standardized instruction, somebody could be learning reading in a whole language approach and then go over here and be doing it on a phonics basis, and you've got a big issues there. You really have to get after states to be more willing on that part. On the teacher quality, you've got 3.2 million K-12 teachers in America. Over the next 5 to 7 years, you're going to see 2 million new teachers replacing teachers. Unfortunately, they're going to be equal to or less than those that are leaving. We're not talking just our teacher colleges, but they're coming from all over, and they're not as skilled and they're not as prepared, and it's a very, very difficult situation.
Dr. Lane?
I think certainly I agree with the idea of some level of national involuntary standards in science and mathematics. There isn't any kind of, Texas math and Oklahoma math and New York math. Well, there actually is, but it's just a joke. I mean, and the same thing is true in science. I mean, there's not an East Coast biology and West Coast biology. Mobility is just extremely important to our nation, as it is to other parts of the world that are wrestling with a similar kind of issue. And by having these kinds of problems that you're addressing present in our system, we're just sort of shooting ourselves in the foot. How far you go with that now really begs a lot of detailed questions that I'm not qualified to answer, but I think that's an extremely important issue, and we do need some sort of national standards. On the issue of quality of teacher education in universities, I've wrestled with that for a long time. Often on a campus, many of us grew up on campuses where the teacher ed department was over there somewhere, and if you're a physics major, chemistry major, math major, you probably never got over there, nor did you ever see any of them in your classroom. It's just a different kind of an institution. It's them and us. Now, things have improved enormously in many of our campuses, but maybe not far enough. And beyond that, I think the universities have I don't know if you want to call it a responsibility, it's just I don't know who to turn to deal more directly with the K-12 challenge than has been the case in the past. The point was made earlier that the quality of those universities and their products depends on who comes in the front end. They have a stake in this. It's important to all of them what goes on in the K-12 classroom, not only in their own region but around the country. Also, there's a knowledge base there that can be tapped into in ways we really haven't done before. So I recognize there would be a lot of resistance to it, but these partnership kind of efforts that I think this committee favors, I think can be carried much, much further, and our universities can take a larger degree of ownership, I guess I should say, for this enormous national challenge than we have done in past years.
Tom, two quick comments. One, note that many of the countries that are now scoring higher than us on some of these international standardized tests, in fact, have national curricula. Now, some are below, so that may not be the only variable for sure, but many have national curricula. The second point is, I've talked to some folks in colleges and universities who said if you really want to get the sciences involved in teacher education and producing more scientists, link NSF grant applications to productivity of science and math educators, and suddenly the science departments will get very interested in working with the education departments.
If I could, Dr. Lane, within our legislation that provides funds for the universities to set up integrated programs where they bring together the math and science and education, and that's a part of the scholarship. And then you have to agree to teach for 5 years. The chair yields to my friend from Texas.
Just one question, I won't even ask the effect of it or what you think about it. I've heard that at least half the PhDs issued in the universities of this country are issued to foreigners. Is that true or untrue?
No, it's in engineering, it's 56%. It's more than that.
More. Would that just be in engineering? PhDs in general?
In science, it's slightly less than 56%. I don't know for non-engineering science the answer, Mr. Hill.
Would you gentlemen yield?
Yes.
Is it the economic motivation for these institutions to encourage foreign nationals to come here to go to school? Are they making such a huge profit?
That's what I agreed not to ask them.
I could comment on that. There are many, I think, different kinds of answers to that. But if you're a university that aspires to be a major research university in this country, for all the reasons we've heard, is a contribution that these institutions are making to America, then your research programs have to be strong. Your laboratories have to function. You've got to be able to attract faculty who can do their research programs. And frankly, when they look around for students to get their education in the university, get their degree, graduate, even postdocs, they don't find nearly enough American-born men and women for the other reasons that we talked about today. So it may sound self-serving, and maybe it is in a way, but it's all about maintaining the strength of American higher education. It's been a result of efforts to do that, and the net result is what we have just heard. There are other reasons, but that's one reason.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I just bring it up, and as the ranking member of the American people are doing a lot of subsidizing for these higher education, and I think we have a right to ask, why are we subsidizing the education of foreign nationals? And I keep hearing, well, it's money, but I think the voters will be saying, well, it's money too, and you're saying it's essential because we just aren't producing this resource in America, so we must import it to fill our universities to create the engineers.
I think in fairness, we need to point out that many of these PhDs that are created stay here, develop products, develop companies, and create jobs. So this is a higher level of entrant. Let me,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I think it might be a good study and a good hearing to look into that and see really if we are getting their dollars worth, what are the facts on how many stay here, and what are the facts as to where they come from and to where they go back to, and what are the benefits. This may be the time to look at it because we're at war for knowledge. We're in a knowledge war today. And our war is fighting for our little troops to start carrying a gun in the first grade, in the second, third grade, and learn to march and all that. And we need to teach them science and math. And I think that'd be a good.
If the gentleman would yield, I would just say that I'm sure there's kids in the Northeast over here that if they had the foundation and if they, there's many American kids in working class neighborhoods that would die for the opportunity, but just don't have the tools. And this issue of importing our students because our domestic sources just cannot compete should be the big warning sign, and not accept this as being the best we can do. And I would ask that we take a look at that hearing.
Well, I would suggest that we have two answers, and two answers are 362 and 363, and would hope everyone would support that. Let me also say to Mr. Hall, he has put up with a lot of our hearings, and so I would welcome his any recommendation that he wants to have to put one together. We will participate with him in a hearing. And let me say to the panel, are there any closing remarks that anyone would like to? Mr. Augustine?
Yes, I would just, Mr. Hall raised such an important question, and I'll just throw out one statistic. Of all the basic researchers in math and science in this country and engineering, 38% are foreign-born. A third of the Nobel laureates in America in math and science in the last 15 years were foreign-born. Our science enterprise in this country would hardly function today without the foreign-born people we have. You raise a very important question.
Mr. McGraw?
Well, again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership in 362 and 363, and the business community supports it, and we look forward to see its passage. I would say that some of the comments that you have made earlier on are some of the areas that I think we need to focus on even further, and that is the whole role of public-private sector cooperation. Now, I think when you start to see what ExxonMobil, just has done in terms of the funding issues, I think there's an awful lot of coordination that could take place around some of these ideas that would allow it to be more efficiently done.
Any other comments? Well, let me say that this panel now holds the Science and Technology Committee indoor endurance record. I think it is indicative of the importance of this panel and also of the issue. We thank you for being here, and the witnesses are excused, and this hearing is adjourned.